The video call notification chimed on Sarah Chen's laptop at 3 a.m. Singapore time. Her mother's face appeared on screen, pixelated and grainy, but Sarah could still make out the nervous energy in her fidgeting hands. "Sweetheart, we need to talk," her mother began, avoiding eye contact with the camera. "There's been a situation." Sarah rubbed her tired eyes, having just returned from another 18-hour day managing the tech infrastructure rollout for a major Southeast Asian client. 6 months into her overseas assignment, she was exhausted, but close to completing the project that would secure her promotion and the financial stability she'd always craved. "What kind of situation, Mom?" Sarah asked, though something in her mother's tone made her stomach clench. "Your father, he's been having chest pains. The doctors say he needs surgery. And our insurance," her mother's voice trailed off. "We had to make a difficult decision about the house." The house, their family home on Maple Street, where Sarah had spent every day of her first 18 years, where her grandmother had lived in the converted basement apartment until she passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind the scent of jasmine tea and hand-knitted blankets that still covered Sarah's childhood bed. Where the backyard garden bloomed with the tomatoes and roses Sarah and her grandmother had planted together, their hands muddy and hearts full. "What do you mean about the house?" Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended. "We had to sell it, honey. The medical bills, they were piling up and we needed the money immediately. We got a good offer from one of your father's friends." "You sold the house?" Sarah's laptop screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. "Mom, you promised that when I was ready, when I had saved enough, I could buy it from you. We talked about this before I left." "I know, sweetheart, but this was an emergency. We didn't have a choice." But even through her shock and grief, something didn't add up. Her parents had decent insurance through her father's union job, and if it was truly an emergency, why hadn't they called her first? She had savings, money she'd been carefully accumulating for exactly this purpose, to buy the family home and preserve the memories held within its walls. "How much did you sell it for?" Sarah asked quietly. Her mother's hesitation spoke volumes. It was a fair price. "Your father's friend Jim, the one with the construction business, he gave us a quick sale. We needed the money right away." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her sterile Singapore hotel room, staring at the city lights beyond her window. The house was gone. The place where she'd taken her first steps, celebrated every birthday, where her grandmother had taught her to cook dumplings, and shared stories of their family's journey to America. The place she'd always planned to return to raise her own children someday. 3 days later, the truth began to unravel. A neighbor's Facebook post showed her parents loading a brand new luxury RV, all smiles and excitement about their retirement adventure. The post was tagged at a casino in Atlantic City. There had been no emergency surgery, no medical crisis, just her father's mounting gambling debts, and her parents' sudden desire for a carefree lifestyle, funded by selling the one thing Sarah treasured most. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional setback or romantic disappointment she'd ever experienced. They had waited until she was halfway around the world, unable to intervene, unable to fight for her childhood home. They had looked her in the eye and lied, trading her memories and her future for their immediate gratification. As Sarah closed her laptop and tried to sleep, one thought crystallized in her mind. With startling clarity, she would get that house back, no matter what it took. 2 months later, Sarah's assignment ended early, when her client was so impressed with her work that they fast-tracked the project completion. She returned to Boston on a gray October morning, her heart heavy with anticipation and dread. Part of her had held on to a desperate hope that maybe, somehow the sale had fallen through, that she'd find her parents sheepishly apologetic and the house still theirs. Instead, she found herself parked across from 47 Maple Street, watching strangers hang Halloween decorations on the front porch, where she used to carve pumpkins with her grandmother. A young couple with 2 small children had moved in, their laughter echoing from the backyard where Sarah's tomato plants once grew. The sight hit her like a physical blow. Someone else was living her life, sleeping in her room, making new memories in the space that held all of her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Surprise, we're back in town for a few days. Want to meet for dinner? We have so much to tell you about our travels." The casual tone, the exclamation points, the complete absence of acknowledgement about what they'd done, it made Sarah's hands shake with rage. She drove to the town hall instead of responding to the text. The records were public, and within an hour, she had the complete story spread across the wooden table in the records room. Sale price $285,000. Current market value for comparable homes in the neighborhood, $85,000 to $500,000. The buyer, James Morrison, Construction LLC. Jim Morrison, her father's poker buddy and frequent drinking companion. Sarah stared at the documents, her business mind automatically calculating the loss. Her parents had essentially given away $200,000 to their friend, money that rightfully should have been part of her inheritance, part of her future. But more than that, they'd sold her birthright for pennies on the dollar. She pulled up the property assessor's website on her phone. The house had been assessed at $65,000 just 6 months before the sale. Jim Morrison had gotten the deal of a lifetime, while her parents had been too desperate or too foolish to even attempt to get fair market value. At the coffee shop across from Town Hall, Sarah called her college roommate, who worked in real estate. "Emma, I need you to look up something for me. What can you tell me about James Morrison Construction?" "Oh, that guy, he's small-time, mostly does kitchen renovations and bathroom remodels." "Why?" "He bought my parents' house. I'm trying to understand his business." A pause, then typing sounds. "According to the business filings I'm seeing, he's not exactly swimming in cash. Looks like he's been taking on a lot of debt recently. His last few projects went over budget. If I had to guess, I'd say he's probably looking to flip properties for quick cash flow." Sarah's pulse quickened. How quickly do people like that usually flip? Guys like Morrison, usually 6 months to a year, depending on how much work the place needs and how desperate they are for cash. "Why, are you thinking of making an offer?" That evening, Sarah finally called her parents back. They wanted to meet at their favorite restaurant, the one they'd been going to for Sunday dinners since she was 12. "Sarah, you look wonderful, honey," her mother gushed, embracing her with an enthusiasm that felt forced. "Wait until you hear about the Grand Canyon. In Vegas, your father had the most incredible luck at the blackjack tables." Her father beamed, his face tanned from months of travel. "We've been having the time of our lives, kiddo. Should have done this years ago." Sarah studied their faces, looking for any sign of guilt, any acknowledgement of what they'd taken from her. Instead, she saw only self-satisfaction and the glow of people who believed they'd gotten away with something. "I drove by the house," Sarah said quietly. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Her mother's smile faltered, and her father suddenly became very interested in his menu. "Oh, well, they seem like a lovely young family," her mother said carefully. $300,000 below market value, Dad." Her father's jaw tightened. "Now hold on, Sarah, we got a fair price. Jim needed to make some profit on the deal, and we needed a quick sale. We couldn't wait around for months trying to squeeze every penny out of my inheritance, you mean." "Your inheritance?" Her father's voice rose slightly. "That was our house, Sarah. We worked our whole lives to pay for it. We had every right to sell it when we needed to. After promising me I could buy it from you, after I spent years saving money specifically for that purpose." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and justifications. Finally, her mother spoke. "We didn't plan for this to happen, Sarah. Circumstances changed." But Sarah had seen the casino photos, the expensive RV, the receipts she'd glimpsed when her father carelessly left his wallet open. She knew about the gambling debts her neighbor Mrs. Peterson had mentioned in their Facebook conversation. This hadn't been about circumstances, it had been about choices. As she drove home that night to her sterile downtown apartment, Sarah made her own choice. If her parents wanted to play games with family legacy and loyalty, she'd play too, but she'd play to win. Sarah spent the next 3 weeks conducting reconnaissance that would have impressed any corporate strategist. Her tech background had taught her the value of thorough research and careful planning, skills that proved invaluable in what she'd begun thinking of as Operation Homecoming. First, she investigated Jim Morrison's financial situation. Public records showed 3 liens against his business in the past 18 months. His construction company had defaulted on a commercial loan, and 2 subcontractors had filed complaints for unpaid wages. Emma's real estate contacts confirmed what Sarah suspected. Morrison was house poor and desperate for cash flow. Better yet, he'd already started renovations on her childhood home. Cheap cosmetic updates designed to maximize flip potential. According to the building permits filed with the city, he was planning extensive work, new kitchen cabinets, updated bathrooms and modern flooring throughout. The permit's estimated completion by January, with the house likely hitting the market by February. Sarah's plan began to crystallize. She would need to move fast, but she had advantages Morrison didn't know about. Her overseas assignment had paid exceptionally well, plus the early completion bonus had padded her savings significantly. More importantly, she had something Morrison desperately needed: cash, and lots of it. But she couldn't approach him directly. If Morrison knew she was the original owner's daughter, he might get suspicious or try to inflate the price out of spite. She needed a shell company, a legitimate business entity that could make offers and purchase real estate without revealing her identity. Sarah registered Maple Leaf Properties LLC in Delaware, choosing the name as a private joke. The maple tree in the front yard had been her grandmother's favorite climbing spot for reading. She appointed herself as managing member and opened a business bank account, transferring $350,000 from her various savings and investment accounts. It was most of her net worth, but this wasn't about money anymore. Next came market research. She studied comparable home sales in the neighborhood, recent property taxes, and mortgage rates. Armed with this data, she calculated that Morrison would likely list the house between $400,000 and $480,000 after renovations, hoping to make a $150,000 $200,000 profit on his investment. Her strategy was elegant in its simplicity. She would make Morrison an offer he couldn't refuse before he even finished the renovation. On a cold November morning, Sarah dressed in her most professional business attire and drove to Morrison's construction trailer parked behind a half-finished office building. She'd rehearsed her pitch carefully, adopting the persona of a shrewd but impatient real estate investor. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Alex Chen from Maple Leaf Properties," she said, deliberately using her middle name and omitting any mention of her relationship to the previous owners. "I understand you're renovating a property on Maple Street with plans to flip it." Morrison looked up from his paperwork, his face weathered and skeptical. "Yeah, what's it to you? I represent investors who are interested in purchasing quality properties in desirable neighborhoods. We prefer to buy before they hit the open market. Saves everyone time and money." His interest was immediate. Sarah could practically see the dollar signs in his eyes. "I'm listening. We're prepared to make a cash offer of $425,000 for the property at 47 Maple Street as is, with a 30-day close." Morrison's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. You mean without finishing the renovations?" "Exactly. We have our own contractors and prefer to handle improvements ourselves. The offer would be contingent on inspection, naturally, but assuming everything checks out, we could close before Christmas." She watched him do the mental math. He'd paid $85,000 for the house and probably invested another $30,000 in materials and partial renovations. Her offer would net him over $100,000 profit without having to finish the work or deal with real estate agents, staging, or months of uncertainty in the market. That's a serious offer," he said slowly. "We're serious buyers. I have a cashier's check for $425,000 as earnest money if you're interested in moving forward." Sarah pulled the check from her briefcase, letting him see the amount. She'd learned in business that sometimes the most persuasive argument was simply showing people the money. Morrison stared at the check for a long moment. "Can I ask why you're so interested in that particular property?" "It fits our investment criteria perfectly. Good neighborhood, solid bones, manageable renovation scope. Properties like that don't stay on the market long once they're listed, and we prefer to avoid bidding wars." It wasn't entirely a lie. The house did fit those criteria. It just also happened to be the place where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd had her first kiss on the front porch, where her grandmother had taught her that home wasn't just a building but a repository of love and memory. "I'll need to think about it," Morrison said, but Sarah could see he was already sold. "Of course. Here's my card. The offer stands for 72 hours. That evening, Sarah drove past the house again, this time parking in the driveway she'd once helped her father repay. The new owners had left their porch light on, and she could see through the windows into the living room where she'd spent countless hours doing homework, watching movies, and listening to her grandmother's stories. Soon, she told herself, soon she'd be back where she belonged. Her phone rang as she sat in the darkness. Morrison's name appeared on the caller ID. "Miss Chen, I've been thinking about your offer. When can we meet to discuss terms?" Sarah smiled for the first time in months. "How about tomorrow morning, Mr. Morrison? I think you'll find we're very easy to work with." The hook was set. Now came the real challenge. revealing to her parents that their daughter had not only discovered their betrayal but had systematically undone it. She began planning the dinner invitation that would change everything. A homecoming in the truest sense of the word. The closing on 47 Maple Street took place on December 15th, exactly 32 days after Sarah's initial offer to Morrison. She sat in the attorney's office, signing documents as the managing member of Maple Leaf Properties LLC, while Morrison counted his profit and praised her for being the easiest buyer he'd ever worked with. If only he knew, Sarah thought, accepting the keys to her childhood home. The first thing she did after Morrison left was walk through every room alone. The house felt different, smaller somehow, changed by the partial renovations and the lingering presence of strangers. Morrison had ripped out the original hardwood floors in the living room and replaced them with cheap laminate. The kitchen cabinets her father had installed with such pride 20 years ago were gone, replaced with builder-grade replacements that looked sterile and temporary. But underneath the surface changes, the bones of her memories remained intact. The creaky third step on the staircase still groaned under her weight. The morning light still filtered through her bedroom window at exactly the same angle, casting familiar shadows on the wall. And in the basement, her grandmother's apartment remained mostly untouched, still smelling faintly of jasmine and old books. Sarah spent the next month methodically undoing Morrison's improvement. She hired contractors to restore the original hardwood floors, sourced vintage fixtures that matched the house's 1940s character, and repainted every room in the exact colors she remembered from childhood. The project cost her another $50,000, but every dollar felt like an investment in justice. Meanwhile, her parents had no idea their daughter was back in town. Their social media showed them traveling through Arizona in their RV, posting photos of desert sunsets and casino buffets. Sarah's mother had texted occasionally cheerful, superficial messages about the weather and their adventures, but never once mentioned the house or asked how Sarah was coping with the loss. In early January, Sarah's plan entered its next phase. She began dropping subtle hints during their phone conversations. "I've been thinking about real estate investing," she mentioned during one call. "The market in Boston is pretty strong right now." "Oh, that sounds risky, honey," her mother replied. "Your father always says you should never invest in something you don't understand." The irony was breathtaking. Sarah bit her tongue and continued building her narrative. "Actually, I made an offer on a property last month. A house in a really nice neighborhood that I think has great potential." "How exciting! Where is it?" "It's a surprise. I'm hoping to close soon, and when I do, I want to celebrate with a dinner party. Would you and Dad be able to come back to Boston for a weekend?" Her parents agreed enthusiastically, pleased to hear their daughter was finally making smart financial decisions, and excited about the free dinner. Sarah scheduled the dinner for January 28th, exactly 1 year after she'd started her overseas assignment. The absence that had made their betrayal possible, the symbolism felt perfect. She spent the week before their arrival making final preparation. The house was now restored to exactly how she remembered it. Every detail perfect, down to the faded throw pillows on the couch and the ceramic owl her grandmother had collected on the mantelpiece. She'd even tracked down the same brand of tea her grandmother had preferred, steeping bags in the kitchen until the scent permeated the air. On the afternoon of the dinner, Sarah positioned herself at the front window, watching for her parents' rental car. Her heart raced with anticipation and nervousness. She'd rehearsed this moment dozens of times, but the reality felt surreal. At exactly 6 p.m., a white sedan pulled into the driveway. Sarah watched her parents get out, her father helping her mother with her purse, both of them chatting casually as they approached the front door. They looked relaxed, tanned, and completely unsuspecting. The doorbell rang. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and opened the door with a wide smile. "Mom, Dad, so good to see you." But instead of entering, they stood frozen on the threshold, their faces shifting from confusion to recognition to something approaching panic. "Sarah," her mother said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, This is our house." "Was your house," Sarah corrected gently, stepping aside to let them in. "Now it's mine. Come in, come in. I have so much to tell you." Her father remained rooted to the spot, his face pale. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "No joke, Dad. Remember how you said I should make smart financial decisions? Well, I bought this house, paid cash for it actually, got a really good deal from your friend Jim Morrison." Her mother's hand flew to her chest. You bought our house?" "I bought my house," Sarah said, her voice hardening slightly. "The house you sold without telling me, the house you promised I could buy from you when I was ready." The house you gave away to your poker buddy for 200,000 less than it was worth. She watched the color drain from both their faces as the implications hit them. They were standing in their former home, now owned by the daughter they'd betrayed, invited here under false pretenses for reasons they were only beginning to understand. Sarah, sweetheart, I think there's been some misunderstanding, her mother began. No misunderstanding, Mom. I know exactly what happened. I know about Dad's gambling debts. I know about the real price Jim paid. I know you lied about the medical emergency. Sarah's voice remained calm, but her words cut through the air like glass. I know everything. Her father's shock was transforming into anger. Now you listen here, young lady. We raised you, we fed you, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. We had every right to sell that house when we needed to. You had every right to sell it for fair market value to people who would love it. Sarah replied evenly. You had every right to be honest about why you were selling it. You had every right to give me a chance to make a counter offer before you gave it away to your friend. The air in the room felt electric with tension. Her parents stood awkwardly in the doorway of what had once been their home, now clearly understanding that they were guests in a space that no longer belonged to them. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, walking deeper into the living room, where family photos she'd rescued from storage now hung on the walls. I'm not unreasonable. I know you're having some financial difficulties with the RV payments and everything, so I have a proposition for you. Her parents followed her into the living room, moving like people in a dream. I need tenants for the master bedroom upstairs. It's a lovely room, you should remember it well. Beautiful morning light, plenty of closet space. I'm thinking of renting it out for $1,500 a month, utilities included. Would you be interested? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see her parents processing the full scope of what she was offering. The chance to live in their former home as her tenants, paying rent to sleep in their old bedroom, guests in the house where they'd raised their daughter. The ultimate reversal was complete, but the real confrontation was just beginning. Her father broke first. The shock on his face transformed into rage, his cheeks flushing red as he stepped forward. You vindictive little bitch, he snarled, his voice shaking with fury. How dare you? How dare you do this to us? Michael, her mother gasped, but he was beyond restraint now. We sacrificed for you your entire life. Every vacation we didn't take, every dinner out we skipped, every goddamn thing we went without so you could have piano lessons in college and all the advantages we never had. And this is how you repay us. Sarah felt the familiar stab of guilt that her father's anger had always triggered, but this time it was accompanied by something new, a cold, crystalline clarity that cut through years of conditioning. You sacrificed, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You sacrificed by selling my inheritance to fund your gambling addiction and buying a luxury RV? You sacrificed by lying to me about medical emergencies while you were posting pictures from Vegas casinos? That house was ours. Her father roared. We worked 30 years to pay it off. We earned the right to do whatever we wanted with it, including breaking your promise to your daughter. Promises change when circumstances change. What circumstances, Dad? Your poker debts? Your sudden desire to live like retirees 20 years before you can actually afford to retire? Her mother stepped between them, tears streaming down her face. Stop it, both of you. Sarah, honey, please. I know we hurt you, but we never meant. Never meant what, Mom? Sarah whirled to face her. Never meant to lie, never meant to sell my childhood home to the lowest bidder while I was trapped on the other side of the world. Never meant to spend my inheritance on slot machines and RV payments. We didn't know you wanted the house so badly. I told you. The words exploded from Sarah's chest, years of suppressed hurt and rage finally breaking free. I told you 100 times how much that house meant to me. I told you about wanting to raise my children in Grandma's room. I told you I was saving money specifically to buy it from you when you were ready to downsize. Sarah's voice cracked, but she pushed through, the words pouring out like water through a broken dam. Do you know what it was like to get that phone call in Singapore? To hear you crying about Dad's emergency surgery while I was sitting in a hotel room 12,000 miles away, unable to help, unable to even come home? Do you know what it felt like to discover you were lying? That while I was working 18-hour days to save money for our house, you were giving it away to your drinking buddy for gambling money. Her parents stood frozen, finally seeing the depth of the wound they'd inflicted. That house wasn't just property to me, Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. It was Grandma teaching me to cook in that kitchen. It was the garden where she showed me how to plant tomatoes. It was every Christmas morning, Every birthday party, every ordinary Tuesday night doing homework at the kitchen table. It was the place I always knew I could come home to, no matter what happened in my life. She walked to the mantelpiece and picked up a photo of her grandmother, her hands trembling slightly. It was the place where Grandma died, holding my hand, telling me that this house would always be my refuge, my anchor. And you sold it. You sold all of that for gambling money and a fucking RV. Her father's anger was deflating, replaced by something that might have been shame. Sarah, we needed the money. The debts were what? More important than your daughter's trust? More important than keeping your word? We thought you'd understand eventually, her mother whispered. We thought you'd get over it. Get over it? Sarah laughed bitterly. Get over having my entire childhood erased for 30 pieces of silver. Get over discovering that my parents valued a quick buck more than their relationship with their only child? She set the photo down and turned to face them fully, her composure returning like armor sliding into place. But here's the thing I realized while I was planning this little reunion. I don't need you to understand what you took from me. I don't need your apology or your excuses or your justifications. I just needed to take it back. Her father's face was ashen now. How much did you pay for it? $425,000. The number hit them like a physical blow. Her mother sank onto the couch, her former couch, in her former living room, and buried her face in her hands. Jesus Christ, her father breathed. Where did you get that kind of money? I earned it, Dad. The same way you were supposed to earn the right to make decisions about this house, through hard work and sacrifice and keeping my promises to the people I love. We don't have that kind of money, her mother said through her tears. We can't pay you back. I don't want you to pay me back, Sarah said. I want you to live with what you've done. I want you to drive past this house every day, knowing that your daughter had to buy back her own childhood because you were too selfish and short-sighted to preserve it for her. She walked to the window and looked out at the street where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd played hopscotch with neighborhood kids who were now adults with children of their own. But I also want you to know that despite everything, I'm not cruel. The offer stands $1,500 a month for the master bedroom. First month's rent and security deposit upfront. References required, of course, but I think I know your character well enough to waive the background check. Her father's pride flickered one last time. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Your alternative is to keep making payments on that RV you can't afford while living in extended stay motels when you're not camping in Walmart parking lots. I've done the math on your finances, Dad. This is probably your best option. You researched our finances? I researched everything. Your debt-to-income ratio, your credit score, your monthly RV payment, your average gambling losses over the past 2 years. I know exactly how desperate your situation is. The fight went out of her father complete. He aged 10 years in that moment, his shoulders sagging as the full weight of his circumstances settled on him. Why? He asked quietly. Why are you doing this to us? Sarah considered the question, looking around the room that now belonged to her again. Every stick of furniture, every family photo, every memory-soaked corner. Because you taught me that family loyalty is conditional, she said finally. You taught me that promises can be broken when it's convenient. You taught me that the people who claim to love you most are the ones most likely to betray you when the stakes are high enough. She walked to the front door and opened it, cold January air rushing into the warm house. But you also taught me that I'm stronger than I knew, that I can survive losing everything and find a way to get it back, that I don't need anyone's permission to fight for what's mine. Her parents stood in the center of the living room, looking lost and small in the space they'd once commanded. The offer expires at midnight, Sarah said quietly. Let me know what you decide. Her parents stormed out that night without another word, her father's parting gesture a slam of the front door that rattled the windows Sarah had just restored. She watched from the living room as they drove away, their rental car disappearing into the darkness, and felt a strange mixture of triumph and emptiness. For 3 days, Sarah threw herself into the final touches on the house, hanging her grandmother's quilts in the basement apartment, arranging family photos on the mantelpiece, restoring every detail to match her memory. The work felt therapeutic, each small act of restoration healing something inside her that she hadn't realized was broken. On the 4th day, her mother called. We'll take it, she said without preamble, her voice hollow and defeated. The room. We'll take the room. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a complex swirl of emotions she couldn't quite name. First month's rent and security deposit. $3,000 total, and we need to discuss ground rules. Ground rules. This is my house now, Mom. My rules. The move-in happened on a gray February morning. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as her parents unloaded their belongings from a U-Haul trailer, their entire lives reduced to a few suitcases and boxes that fit in the bedroom where they'd once been masters of their domain. The RV sat in the driveway like a monument to their poor choices, too expensive to keep, too worthless to sell. The first few weeks were excruciating. Her parents crept around the house like unwelcome guests, speaking in whispers, avoiding eye contact. Her father spent most of his time in the bedroom or out looking for work, any work, while her mother obsessively cleaned spaces that were already spotless, as if she could somehow earn back her place through domestic penance. Sarah established her boundaries with surgical precision. Rent was due on the first, no exceptions. Common areas were shared, but she controlled the thermostat, the television, and the household decision. Her parents could eat meals with her if they contributed to groceries, but they had to ask permission to invite guests or make any changes to their living space. "It's humiliating," her father muttered one evening during their first awkward shared dinner. "Yes," Sarah agreed calmly, cutting her chicken. "It is." The honesty was brutal but necessary. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah held the power in their relationship, and she wielded it with the same calculated precision she'd used to reclaim the house. But as winter melted into spring, something unexpected began to happen. The forced proximity and shared financial pressure created cracks in the wall of resentment between them. Small conversations started about the leaky faucet in the bathroom, about splitting the cost of groceries, about her father's job interviews. Nothing earth-shattering, but communication nonetheless. The breakthrough came in late March when Sarah found her mother crying in the kitchen at 2. "I'm sorry," her mother whispered, not looking up from her tea. "I'm so sorry for what we did to you." Sarah stood in the doorway in her pajamas, watching this woman who had raised her, who had betrayed her, who was now broken and small at the kitchen table where they'd shared 1,000 meals. "I know you are," Sarah said quietly, sitting down across from her. "Your father, he gets so angry when money gets tight, and he convinced me that selling was the only way, but I knew. Deep down, I knew it would hurt you, and I let it happen anyway, because it was easier than fighting." Her mother's tears fell onto the table, and Sarah felt her own eyes beginning to burn. "I didn't just lose the house, Mom. I lost my faith in you, in us. I know, and I don't know how to fix that." "Maybe you can't," Sarah said. "Maybe we just have to build something new." The conversation didn't solve everything, but it opened a door that had been locked since that horrible phone call in Singapore. Over the following months, more doors opened. Her father's pride cracked enough for him to acknowledge his gambling problem and start attending meetings. Her mother began contributing to household expenses by taking on freelance bookkeeping work. They weren't the family they'd been before. That innocence was gone forever, but they were becoming something different, something more honest. By autumn, the house felt less like a battlefield and more like a shared space. Sarah had learned to see her parents not as the omnipotent figures of her childhood, but as flawed humans who'd made terrible choices and were now living with the consequences. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. They were her tenants, dependent on her goodwill, but within that framework, they were slowly finding their way to a new kind of respect. One evening in October, exactly 2 years after that devastating phone call, Sarah sat in her grandmother's room, reading a book her grandmother had loved. The scent of jasmine tea drifted up from the kitchen where her mother was making her nightly cup. Her father's television played softly upstairs, the sound carrying through the house like a heartbeat. It wasn't the family she'd dreamed of having, but it was the family they'd chosen to become. Complicated, damaged, honest in a way they'd never been before. The revenge had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. She'd reclaimed her house, rewritten the power structure of their relationship, and forced her parents to confront the consequences of their betrayal. But somewhere along the way, the revenge had transformed into something more valuable, the knowledge that she could survive the worst kind of betrayal and still choose love over bitterness. Sarah closed her book and looked around the room where her grandmother had taught her that home wasn't just a place, it was a choice you made every day to build something worth protecting. She'd protected this house, these memories, and ultimately, this complicated, imperfect family. And finally, she was home.